from the very beginning, 55,000 Degrees has been committed to focusing on the data and the relentlessness with which we have as a community looked at that data, sometimes with great joy and sometimes with definitely less than joy. But I think that's been a hallmark of what 55,000 Degrees has done. The other piece that has been so powerful has been the commitment of 55,000 Degrees to a process of bringing our community together, to empowering voices and empowering individuals, creating connections and community that as when I look at this screen, I can see so many faces that have been involved at various points and then shifted roles and continue to be involved and then shifted roles and are no longer even in this community, but are still back for this event to be a part of not just the process of celebrating and 55,000 Degrees, but also thinking about what comes next. And so that's a really exciting part of what we're doing today. One of the things that 55,000 Degrees has done so well is take advantage of that community to create ideation, to create powerful interactions and relationships. And the unenviable task of making some sense of that for this has gone to Dr. Tait Kellogg. She is the Director of Research and Strategic Services at Higher Ed Insight and has helped many communities to help make sense of their educational initiatives. She and her team have created a remarkable report, I think only made possible by her passion for gumbo. She has a personal experience and passion with this dish that brings together all of these various spices and ingredients and simmers them over time. And I can only imagine that that was actually the key to you creating something that we're excited to hear about now. So, Dr. Tait Kellogg.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. I guess still good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tait Kellogg. Thank you for that colorful introduction, Ben. Ben asked me to share a fun fact about myself, and I told him I lived in New Orleans from the Gulf Coast, and I love to make gumbo. So in case you're wondering why he shared that just now, you all know Ben, so you all know the color and joy he brings to everything. Thank you to Mayor Fisher. Thank you to Mary Gwynn. As Ben did say, our team at Higher Ed Insight is really passionate about this project, about degree attainment broadly, but we've really, really enjoyed being a part of putting together the report that you all have. John, if you could put a link to that in the chat, just in case anyone doesn't have it right in front of them. I am going to give you just a taste of it today. This is not going to be a long academic presentation. It's just going to be a little taste so that I hope you all will go and read it and hear the voices from your community that are lifted up within it. So the purpose of this report was that we were, there's been tremendous learning, as we all know, as we're going to see it a lot of different ways today, that took place for Louisville as a result of 55,000 Degrees. So we were hired to do this retrospective analysis just to document that learning and really lift up the different things that happened over the last decade. Our study is based on two main sources of data. So one, we did a document analysis of a lot of Mary Gwynn's material. So we counted up a total of 294 documents. So these are things like board meeting minutes, grant applications, campaigns, a lot of things you've probably seen around Louisville, or maybe you've been a part of in small meetings across the last decade. And we did some coding, what we call coding with qualitative methods, but we did a lot of memos really to document what happened and really figure out what changes occurred over time in order to put this story together in a way that we could share with all of you. The second source of data was key stakeholders, and we actually interviewed quite a few people. This is a really large number for what we typically do. There's just been a lot of people involved and important to 55,000 Degrees over the last decade. So we talked to 22 of you. I bet many of you are on the call now, and that was really the qualitative data that informed the findings that you're going to see today. So I'm not going to go into the whole great story of 55,000 Degrees. Again, it's really laid out in the report. I did want to show you this kind of overview timeline, which outlines some of the highlights of what happened in the last decade. The big one I want to point out is May 13th, 2010. So 10 years ago now, the Greater Louisville Education Commitment was signed by many leaders across the community. And that really launched 55,000 Degrees, which in essence was stakeholders across Louisville working in concert to build a culture towards moving toward degree attainment. So It started with aiming high. I love how Mayor Fisher was known for saying 1 degree at a time. How are we going to do 55,000 degrees? We're going to do it one at a time. But this big goal was really key to the success of 55,000 degrees. The second way that we really wrote this story was really centering learning. So 55,000 degrees has been a very learning oriented organization, but also movement across Louisville. Learning has been key here. Data has been key. And we talked about that a lot in the report when it came to this, some midpoint pivots that happened along the way, which really were a result of willingness to learn and change and grow over time. And all of that led to the, one of the reasons we're all here today is just the great achievement that has happened in Louisville as a result of coming together in this way. One key aspect of 55,000 degrees has been collective impact, especially in the first 5 years. And 3 elements of collective impact that were really successful for 55,000 degrees were: 1, convening the table, bringing everybody together around a goal. 2 was being backed in data. Data was one of the main themes by far that came up in our interviews, and the willingness to constantly look at the data and make decisions based on the data was really important for what worked well. And then finally, this term from collective impact is called mutually reinforcing activities, which is essentially a lot of different groups on this call representing universities, funders. We have a long list of who was involved in this. Those were all key to people coming together, collectively coordinating activities. Have to lift up this quote from Mayor Fisher here. It says, when you think about how to solve big problems from a business standpoint, you say, we need a cross-functional solution here. We've got to bring in people from different parts of the system to take a look at what's going on. And that was the design of 55,000 degrees from the beginning. Very quickly, I do want to highlight a few of the headwinds that happened. There were some challenges in the last decade, and that we all know there are several ahead as well as we're thinking about the year 2020. But since the Great Recession, a lot of states did cut higher education funding, post-secondary funding. Unfortunately, Kentucky is in the bottom 10 of those that have not brought that funding back. So Kentucky is spending an average of about $2,800 per student per year less in this decade than they were a year before, which is a big challenge. Relatedly, that financial burden has been shifted at the 4-year level to students and families. So if you see the list of institutions here, all of these institutions have had increases in tuition. We know that happens pretty much all the time, but this is actually net price. So this calculates things like grants and scholarships. Ultimately, what students are paying is a lot more at our 4-year institutions locally. So that's a big challenge for higher education. And then there's quite a bit about the K12 system. A large urban system has a number of different elements that we want to look at for what's happening. And one of the big challenges is that college rates of JCPS students has gone down over the last decade when it comes to who's actually enrolling directly after graduating, which is a big challenge as well. Despite these challenges, here's the image I want you to look at and really walk away from. The red line here is the 50% goal. And so 50% was not achieved, but this line went up quite a bit. So we're looking at 46% today of Louisvillians now have a degree, which is nearly 8-point increase over time. I loved how the mayor brought this to life, right? Like, I'm used to looking at data. I think anyone's been involved in 55K is used to looking at this chart. But what we're talking about here is, individuals, families that have changed. And then overall for Louisville has moved up 1 rank in degree attainment compared to peer cities in the last decade. And these different initiatives have made a big impact on that. So what I want you to walk away from is not 55,000 degrees, but 40,000 degrees have been added, not 50%, but 46%. And that's a big change, something that can be celebrated for Louisville. More educated city in 2020 than it was a decade ago. Numbers alone do not tell the whole story. And that's a big reason that we did this report. That's what we wanted to document. So there's quite a few different things that happened that are more qualitative, things that really, changed in the community. So 55,000 degrees, for example, led Louisville to coalesce around a common goal. This quote from Ty Handy says, "There has been no community I have been in that has been more concerned about education achievement and the hope divide and the challenges as this one." Now, we're a big cumbersome place, so actually licking the problem is a different issue. But just coming together around this common goal is a really big deal. And related is just embedding collective impact in the DNA of the city. 55,000 Degrees established that data, again, data was key. Data is one of the big ways to drive focusing stakeholders around a goal. So Teresa Reno Weber said, I think that one of the most compelling pieces of 55,000 Degrees, the goal is in the name. The data point is there. There was a recurring theme and cadence to meeting and looking at the data, reporting out to the community. There was also the ability at some point to ring a bell, sound an alarm, and say that we're not going to get there. So that really fits with our learning-oriented organization finding when it comes to 55,000 Degrees and Louisville in this attainment goal. The ability to pivot using the data. 15K, the corollary organization devoted entirely to degree attainment for Black Louisvillians, was lifted up a lot in interviews as a key success, in addition to other equity efforts at the University of Louisville, at the community college, etc. Issues of racial equity certainly came up. So here are 2 quotes relevant to that. 15K's approach of a specific goal organization infrastructure for engaging credential attainment within the Black community in Louisville was and remains a very innovative and unique angle. That's from Haley Glover at the Lumina Foundation, who works with a lot of similar degree attainment organizations and initiatives, and was able to lift this up without even being asked, that this is one of the big successes in her mind at 55,000 Degrees and 15K in particular. Audwin Helton said, a result of 55,000 Degrees being a champion for equity is that participating in it has helped the business community to fully understand equity versus equality. And also, adult learners is another real, important point here, that 55,000 Degrees recognize the importance of adult learners when it comes to community level degree attainment and adding more degrees. And it was really recognized, especially from people like Haley Glover from an outside perspective, as being ahead of its time for Louisville and 55,000 Degrees to lift that up. Another big win is that post-secondary institutions, locally are producing more degrees. So Louisville institutions made numerical and equity gains in college persistence, graduation, and degree completions. And the number to walk away from here is that 2,500 more degrees are being produced annually in Louisville than a decade ago. So that's a big win as well, the higher ed level. Very quickly, I'm just going to go through some lessons learned. So using data to raise issues of equity is important, but it's only a first step here. So 55,000 Degrees, Also, they made intentional choices, the leaders of this organization and the initiative, to commit to equity and education attainment from its inception. But we all know, as Mayor Fisher just lifted up, that structural racism and barriers around poverty have to be addressed very directly if gaps are to be made when it comes to attainment for Black and Latinx community members. So more work to be done there, of course. I'm sorry, I believe that I have clicked on the wrong slide here, but that's okay. You guys get where I'm going from here. And then, a big goal here has been work to raise degree attainment among adult learners. And that's been a real challenge. So adult learners with some college, no degree, are not always the low-hanging fruit that we hope they will be, these kind of comebacker community members. Michael Gritton had a quote specifically about degrees at work, which said, we were starting to make progress, but we weren't making it fast enough to keep the startup alive. The only way it's going to work to build something like this that directly helps adult learners is if you have government or outside funding to sustain it. So there's more work to be done ahead for the city of Louisville when it comes to adult learners. And then finally, big learning is that bringing previously siloed sectors to the table around a common goal measured by data is necessary, but not sufficient. So ultimately, there is a limit to collective initiatives' influence, and that's something that's really being considered in this next era. So we're here today to learn, but we're also here to celebrate the increased attainment for the city of Louisville. 55,000 Degrees is sunsetting. It was built on a time-bound goal, but it's leaving behind a culture of data, of collaboration across sectors, and I really think of purposefulness around post-secondary attainment for the community of Louisville. Future initiatives in Louisville, which include the legacy organization of Vol 502, which we'll talk more about in a minute, are going to build on this learning for the next era. So thank you so much for having us today. And of for all being here together to celebrate the achievements of this initiative.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kellogg. I think you did a remarkable job of pulling together the essential flavors out of the various pieces of our community gumbo here. And I think you highlighted some of the really powerful both successes and failures that we have had. And I think one of the really powerful things about this initiative is that we continue to learn. We continue to learn as a community. We continue to learn as individuals. And one of the things that this organization has done that I think you highlighted is helping us to figure out how to embed the work and learnings that we have made along the way into the institutions that have sustainability and will continue to serve partly of all 502, but also the colleges and JCPS and all of the other institutions that are through the Cradle to Career pipeline from Ready for K, Kentuckiana Works, and others. So thank you for highlighting so many of those things.